Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of the Shema podcast. It is great to be back in front of the mic. It has been a few weeks. I have a great question that I want to explore and a great rabbi that's sitting here with me that's going to answer it for us. But I want to begin by addressing something that came up on an Insider podcast last month. And I want to discuss that a little more. So one of the things I brought up to the Torch rabbis that they wanted to explore on the Insider podcast, and if you're not subscribing to those, it's subscription only. You need to reach out to Rabbi Yochel Folby. He has the keys to the castle for getting access to that. But one of the things I brought to the rabbis was, are you devoting too much time to doing podcasts at the expense of not being available to have relationships with the students? Because what was so valuable to me over the years, especially as I was beginning my observance, was the relationship and being able to reach out to them. You know, like wanting to learn Shabbos and experience Shabbos for the first time and having access to them. And same with everything, being able just to consult with them on a one-on-one basis. And one of the things they impressed upon all of you, the listeners, was that anyone who wants that relationship, obviously they don't have contact information when you listen to a podcast, but definitely reach out to them and they're going to be there for you 100%. But I got a lot of emails coming in saying that were shared with me from the other rabbis, like, who's this Dan Coleman? He's trying to take our Rabbi Wolbe podcast. Like, I'm not trying to take our podcast from us. I rely on them as well. But there's something else I wanted just to stress to you. One of the things and one of the ways I have learned the most Torah over the last 3.5 years I've been living here is not through the listening to the Torah lectures, either in person or through podcasts. It is through the observation of people that are at a much higher level. You know, to see how people live a life of Torah, it speaks so much more. It teaches so much more that you can get from just listening to a podcast. And I'm going to give you an example of this. I was talking to someone on a very high level, and he saw it's like, something's bothering you, Dan. And I said, yeah, I am struggling with something. He's like, well, let's talk. Maybe I can help out. And I spoke to him, and he gave me some advice. But here's why I learned the most from him. I learned that he is going through the exact same thing. However, the way he internalized it, it was totally different. But here's the other thing I learned was that I was so focused on Dan, me, my challenges, that I wasn't thinking about anyone else. He was still thinking about everyone around him. He was still thinking about Klei Yisrael, looking for people that need his help. He wasn't just becoming self-centered as a result of his challenge. And to me, that was just observing that taught me so much more about how we live a life of Torah, the way Hashem wants us to emulate him. And then I was busy, doing a lot of research on stocks for running investments. And I noticed how, I spent a lot of time looking at the company's return on investment capital. How productive is management using the capital, the debt and the equity? And I learned about myself and started thinking about it that our capital structure is debt. We come in this world, Hashem lends us a body, time, an intellect, unique personality traits and skill sets, financial resources, the people we bring in our life. But when we die, we got to pay back the debt. And what are we left with? And all that is the return we made on Hashem's investment capital in us. And I realized that if I were to analyze Dan Coleman the way I analyze these companies, I wouldn't have passed mustard. I would not have passed the test. It would have gone into the archive file of my research. And shortly after I came across that truth about myself and realized that what I really needed with my challenge was really Hashem trying to guide me to improve what I can control, which is my internal self. And then I have another friend call me up and said, Dan, I heard on a very confidential basis, you're struggling with something. I can help. And we talked for a while, and he goes, Dan, I'm going through the exact same thing. And here, once again, a fellow Yid going through the exact same thing, but concerned about me, not himself. And it was just so unbelievable, just to be around people that are on such a higher level than you is where you learn so much. So what I told him was, I said, I know what the problem is. It's nothing to do with the external situation. I realized that I haven't studied Gemara in over a year and a half because the rabbi I studied with is only available at 8 p.m. By 8 p.m., I am toast. I need to start to get myself ready to go to sleep so I can get to bed by 9:30 so I can wake up at 4 and be ready to go. And I said, here's how you can help me. Would you be available at 3:30 to study Gemara with me? Because that's when the market's closed, I'm still fresh. And he said, absolutely. But the reason I'm sharing this with you is because if you're not in a community, definitely learn all the Torah you can, all the podcasts. What I'm trying to tell you is that there's just a level of learning by just observing people and being around them and meshing yourself around people that are greater than you. And, try to think about maneuvering in that direction because I'm telling you, it makes life go a lot easier when you can see Torah in action. So now I want to bring on our guest, Rabbi Nagel, another rabbi that I've learned so much from, including what I've learned from him is just the silent observation of the way he conducts himself.
Welcome to the Shema Podcast, the podcast for the perplexed, where Torah insights intertwined through personal stories as well as interviews with leading Torah scholars demonstrate the empowering qualities of Torah and mitzvot. For more great Torah learning through Torch, the Torah Outreach Center of Houston, go to torchweb.org. Now to the show.
Rabbi Nagel, thank you so much for coming on the Shema Podcast.
Wow, this introduction was so great listening to. So thank you so much. I'm happy to go right now. I feel like I got so much out of this already.
Isn't that amazing though? Like two different people, same problem, and they're concerned about me. And here I was just so self-absorbed. It's just like, that's the secret to life. Get out of yourself. The Jewish people are one soul at the root. We're here as separate limbs. And if my left finger is throbbing, it doesn't mean that I ignore my right hand, or my brother, and when you get out of your own problems, you find probably those problems you had become resolved because Hashem I think he wants to see us connected to each other, correct?
Absolutely. And that is the key of everything is to, sometimes we are our own worst enemy. And like when we're stuck inside of ourselves, then we can't get out. But when we are able to see outside, then that's where we can actually achieve. I was just thinking, just as a great segue to that, it's a very worthy point. Yosef was in jail, and he was stuck in jail through no fault of his own, and he had the wherewithal to pay attention and notice the fellow people in jail and notice that they were a bit off that day. It's like, what's the matter? Your faces are like not the same as usual. And they said, well, we had this disturbing dream. And it was because Yosef was able to be out of sight of his own misery to notice what they're experiencing. That was the beginning of him being able to be free from the jail. So that's exactly really the point that you're bringing up.
Amazing. And you did share on a previous podcast we did together that it was on how to battle the Yetzer Hara. And you said it's a study of Gemara because it's an exercise. It's different than studying like the Mishnah elucidated, which is what I've been studying by myself because I can understand it. It's all like broken out for me. It's like Torah that can spoon-fed for me, right? But when you're studying Gemara, you're looking at all these different angles. And you said it sort of trains you to look outside of yourself, and that's lends to what we're talking about here. Beautiful. Okay, so here is the question. It's multiple layers, Rabbi. It came up with my family, not this last Shabbos, but the Shabbos before. Well, I'm going to approach it in layers. We have our Hebrew calendar, a way we measure time, and it was given to us by the one who created time. I think we can rely on Hashem to know how to best measure time, but especially for those of us who are not brought up observant, we're sort of attached to the Gregorian Calendar, a calendar created by Pope Gregory, which I understand from all the popes, he was actually probably at the top tier as probably the nicest of the Jews, which says a lot, right? But we end up finding these times in the calendar, and we talk a lot on this podcast about the different times in the year and what they bring and help us with our growth, but we have these personal times, birth dates, and anniversaries. So the first part of the question is, do we acknowledge the date in the Gregorian calendar, or do we go and find out what the date is in the Hebrew calendar and only acknowledge that date?
Okay, so here's the reality. It's not a matter of recognizing a Gregorian calendar per se, but we Jews as a whole recognize that there is a solar calendar that measures time by the position of the sun. And they recognize, and it's very real, that the sun has a cycle. And the Jews are very much attuned to the solar cycle. And every year, 365 and a quarter days, the sun is back in the same spot. And that's significant because that's the solar anniversary. And therefore, one's birthday in the solar calendar is significant because that's where the sun revolved. It's a full circle. It's coming full circle again. And that's significant. And there's numerous laws that recognize that and deal with that. There are a number of halachos. Interesting. I mean, it's not that practical until we bring korbanos, but the age of a korban for an animal, some animals need to be within the first year. Some need to be older. How do we define that age? So there are opinions that it's based on the solar calendar because the animals don't work by the Jewish calendar, so to speak. It's an amazing thing, though. The Jewish calendar is, you said it's set by God, but really it's deeper than that because what happens is God gave the power to the rabbis, to the Jewish people, to establish the calendar based on the principles. And it was a visual thing and was moving. Can we observe the new moon? Then it's the new month already. Can we not observe it? Cloudy that night? Well, push it off to the next day. That's the system worked originally, till it became too difficult to do that, and it had to be established with a calendar that we're working with today. That's actually set down. It's a 19-year cycle that matches up with the solar, and it's very complicated math. I have a friend whose father was a nuclear physicist. I think he's still around, and he took it upon himself to do the actual calculations to try and understand the whole math behind it. And he said that it's amazing how they were able to do that because even with the power of computers, the calculations were so enormous and it was so difficult to match up to the level that they were able to do. So it itself is a feat of human ingenuity, albeit with wisdom derived from God. But the point being is that when we say every holiday, we never just say God who sanctified the times. What we say is God who sanctified Israel in the times. Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. Because he infused us with the ability to establish the times. So it's the Israelites first, and then after that it's the times. And that's in distinction to Shabbos, which is set without us. That's why we'll say if it's Shabbos and Yom Tov together, we say Mekadesh HaShabbos, and then V'Yisrael v'Hazmanim. That's how we do it, which is very... So, now I want to clarify. So that power is for a Jew is defined by this Jewish calendar. So I'll give you an example, an extreme example, to indicate how it works. You could have twins that are born 2 minutes apart, and the second one will have, here's how it's going to happen. The second one is going to have his bar mitzvah before the first one. Okay, how can that be? A month before, basically. How's that? Because they were born in a year when we have 2 months of Adar. The first one was born at the 30th, the last day, and the second one was born on the first day. And their bar mitzvah is going to come out when there's only one Adar. What happens? Well, the one who was born on the first will be, he's younger, mind you. Mm-hmm. His bar mitzvah is Adar 1, and the other one is Adar 29. Okay? How'd that happen? Because that's just the way it is. Okay? Now you understand the idea. Okay?
Right.
So the point being is that, and yet that's how, like, there's like a controlling of creation in a sense that's happening by the Jewish calendar. That being said, it certainly is significant and recognized the validity of a solar cycle. and the validity of the lunar cycle. They're both valid. And that's why even the lunar calendar, the way we have it, is not strictly lunar the way Arabs work it. It's lunar corrected to match the seasons. And that's how we have in that extra month. So it's absolutely significant, the point in time in the solar calendar, the way, what day it is in a solar year. So recognizing that in the solar cycle, this is the anniversary of when I was born, that's a significant time. And the same is true. And they're both significant. And therefore, your birthday in the Hebrew date is more significant because that defines you in terms of when you hit adulthood, all those things, you're able to be counted for a minyan, okay? Right. These are things that are real things that are happening on account of the Jewish date. So yes, it counts more, but they're both significant. That's the answer.
Okay, so sticking with birth dates, both events are significant. What is our service to Hashem on our birth date? What is, besides, the birthday hat and whatever else you may do to celebrate it, like truly, what does Hashem want us to be doing on that day? What is the significance of it? Congratulations, you lived another year.
I honestly, when I wore a younger man's shoes, back in the day, it occurred to me that birthdays in general, the reason why we celebrate birthdays is to cheer up someone. Because there's the natural reaction of your birthday is like a sad day. Because after all, I'm a year older, and what do I have to show for it? And here we make you a celebration. We try to throw you a party. We try to show you that we appreciate that you're here in this world, and we want you to just see the positive. That yes, you do make a positive impact, and you're important. You know what I'm saying? And that's really what we're doing when we're trying to throw a party for somebody who we love, who's having a birthday. So at this point, I'm trying to say that there's very little literature in the Talmud describing birthdays. If you look in the Torah, you find that Paro celebrated his birthday. Yom Hulad, says Paro. And that was the day that he reviewed all of the rulings that he did in the past year and revisited it, which is a fascinating idea. And, so different views. Some say that's not, we can't learn from Paro, and others say, no, we absolutely need to learn from Paro, because if it's written in the Torah, it's significant by definition. And there's something special about a birthday that's being conveyed over here, tangentially, that yes, something's happening here, that Paro, on his birthday, is revisiting everything that happened in the past year. And that's really, in my mind, that's an important part of what the avoda, what the service is on a birthday, is to review the last year, because it's another year of your being in this world. And are you a year closer? So it's kind of like the Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur of you. You know what I'm saying? And that's itself very significant. The Rosh Hashanah is the anniversary of the year, okay, of the world. So that's when the world is God saying, should I cut my losses right here on this world because it's pretty bad, or do I reinvest, and double down? These are the questions that God has to decide. That's why it's so scary, because you look at the state of the world and you say, something, I don't know, I certainly cannot say with certainty that this is going to be. It needs easy decision on God's part. It's for sure I'm going in on this. So that's this danger. That's why, the trepidation and the days of awe is because that's the anniversary of the world, of mankind. But in a mini way, that's clearly what's happening on our own birthday. It's that anniversary of God deciding that your soul needs to come down from wherever it is in heaven and put into a body for a purpose, which is one of the key things that we need to recognize, that we are all here for a purpose. And this is the anniversary of that, and that's why it's very, very significant. There is one other that the birthday is pointed out as being very significant, and that's Moshe died on his birthday, and that we know that that was, the seventh day of Adar. And that's what the Talmud tells us about what Haman thought that it would be a perfect month to destroy the Jews, because that's the month that Moshe died in, not realizing that, this is what the Talmud tells us, that it was the month that he was born in as well. So it wasn't a bad month. And there's an idea that God completes the years of the righteous, that the righteous tend to die on their birthday, meaning they completed their mission. They finished the job, so to speak. So there is a value. There's something very significant about a birthday, even for Jews, not only in Paro's world, which is a message, but we find it by that. And we're also told that David HaMelech, King David, died on, it's upcoming now, the holiday of Shavuos. He died on Shavuos, and that was his birthday as well.
So we do acknowledge both. It gives us a stopgap if we forget our wife's birthday, and we say, no, we were going to celebrate it on
the other one.
The other one. Okay. All right. So now this is going to get a little more serious, a little more, I guess, of a sensitive nature. But I know, and this is what brought this whole topic up, and I know there's a lot of Jews that are faced with similar situations. So 2 Shabbases ago was May 18th. That was the day in the Gregorian calendar when I married my wife originally. But several years ago, she was converted and we got remarried. So the question is do we acknowledge May 18th or the equivalent Hebrew date? Because while my wife didn't do anything wrong back in 2002, I, on the other hand, out of total ignorance, I didn't know, but I married a non-Jew, prohibited. The quote-unquote rabbi married us on Shabbos. We had the kesubah, and it was like I signed it on Shabbos. I wrote a check to him on Shabbos. I look back, it's like, I'm not sure how Hashem wants me to internalize that. Am I supposed to fill bags? I don't. I appreciate that I married my wife. We ended up converting, becoming Eli Sheva, and now we have this amazing life together. But at the time, what I was doing was not kosher on many different levels. So we're sort of confused on, does Hashem want us to acknowledge that date? Can we celebrate it? Or just sort of act like, I don't know, just focus on the new one? I don't know. How do we acknowledge those dates? What do we do with that?
It's such an important question, and I appreciate the fact that you're willing to discuss something that's quite sensitive. But what I feel is important, and I'll just get to give it like a little background from story in Torah. Okay, we're familiar with this. The father-in-law of Moshe, his name was Jethro, and he was a priest. Okay, he was a priest, and he was an amazing individual in many ways. He was a very good person. The Midrashim tell us that he was one of the chief advisors, a brilliant man. He was one of the chief advisors of Paro. Okay, Paro was the leader of the world at the time, the world power, Egypt at its height. And he had 3 main advisors. One was Job. One was Bilam. We know who he was. Big troublemaker. And the other was Jethro. And he asked the 3 of them, well, what should I do about the Jewish people? And Bilam said, you got to kill them. They're terrible. I hate them. Okay? That was Bilam's take. Stayed silent. He knew it was, not a good idea to say something the king did not want to hear. Pharaoh didn't want to hear, so he just kept silent. And as we know, Eov suffered because of that. And Yisro said the unpopular opinion is that's a wrong thing to do. And he had to run away, and that's why he left. That takes a person with a lot of compassion and care, very good heart. Okay? Well, Yisro had a mission. He really wanted to serve God. But he had a method, and his method was to search every single religion in the world and worship in that way, trying every single religion. Imagine what that was. He went to every single religion that he could find, asking them, how do you worship? What's your system? What do you do? What's your belief system? Trying to live it and understand it. and went through every religion. And then he came to Judaism, and he finally said, this is it. And he merited to have the greatest man in our history to marry his daughter. Such an amazing thing. Okay. Now, there's a verse which is very cryptic and very difficult to understand. But Yisro made Moshe take an oath. And it says so in the text, that Moshe swore not to leave him. But according to the way the commentaries explain it, Yisro wanted that Moshe's son should also explore all the religions.
Really?
Yeah. And Moshe, having no choice, acquiesced to that. And in the end, it didn't work out so well, put it that way.
Yeah, there's not a lot of discussion of Moshe's
children. Right, very little. We have Gershom and Eliezer. We have a grandson of Moshe that comes up later on that was a priest in a temple that was like a temple for Jewish people of idolatry. And he was the priest there.
He was following the agreement to try everything out.
Right, kind of. It was fascinating. It's a fascinating story unto itself. But what Yisro was really bringing out, and this is why I say this story is very relevant, what Yisro was trying to say is that I feel that my life, in the whole experience of searching at every religion, wasn't for naught. It strengthened my whole everything. He didn't decide once he found Judaism to cut the past and make it like it didn't exist anymore.
Right.
He felt that it enriched his life as a Jew because it was experiences that made him appreciate it even more. That's what I want to bring out from that story. And that's, to me, the proper perspective that you really need to have. It happens with many people. They go through, either they have a journey or they grew up like completely ignorant. But those experiences that they had and things that they learned and things that they did, in hindsight, well, I never would have done that if I knew then what I know now. But the decision to marry who you married at that point in time was knowing what we know now. It was not done correctly, but there was a soul there that you had discovered that was to be a Jewish soul. When you think about it in the grand scheme of things, that soul was there at Mount Sinai receiving the Torah. We know that now. We didn't know it then. And to me, that itself is like a very significant thing. And I think you can really split the two. It's like, I'm not regretting what I did then in my ignorance, even though I recognize fully that I did many things wrong. You understand? It's really the splitting out of the two things. The fact of the matter is that was the day that I chose to spend my life with this individual, with this neshama, that the neshama was in her then as well. And there was something that you somehow deep inside of you knew or saw that was special. And to me, that itself is worthy of appreciation and thanking God that happened under the circumstances. You understand?
Right.
And it's with the balance. And I think that's very important too. Again, you're not saying, I don't regret doing this aver and that aver. I do regret it. But and it's very important to learn how to forgive yourself of things that you did in ignorance and say it was for a greater cause. And there was an ultimate result that was very positive. And it just started there. So to me, that's the perspective I think is the right way to look at it. It's a bit nuanced because you want to make sure you're not condoning behavior. You're not. But only now, with the 2020 hindsight that we have, do we realize that there was something very special that was happening, even though it was Shabbos. Okay? But there was something very, very special that was going on at that moment. Albeit it wasn't the real time, and I do think you still have to celebrate but you really have to celebrate both of them.
Okay, all right. So 2 anniversary gifts. Okay, so there is this idea too that when you're making me think about this, is that when we do a sin, but then we do teshuvah and we turn around, that sin actually becomes positive. Becomes a positive, and that's sort of what took place there. But that whole idea is not that you say up front, I'm going to do a sin, and then I'll do teshuvah, and I'll be better off because
that's not
how it works.
Then it won't work, right?
It's only when you find out afterwards what I did, and but so you're right. That moment, because it's hard. Like in my heart, I was like, I don't have regret, Hashem, for marrying this woman, the first time, because I wouldn't have been able to marry her as a Jew the second time. And there's so much good that's come from the world because of that first marriage. Now that she's Jewish, and we have this amazing daughter, and we're creating a foundation for future generations, God willing. Okay. So I don't get off the hook 2 anniversary gifts.
That is the bottom line.
Okay. And I would assume the same thing is also that I also have 2 birthday gifts to get her, right? Because she was born on July 19th, and then we'll find the corresponding Hebrew date, but then on her conversion.
That's a special day.
It's a very special day, which she was basically, is her birthday in a way, correct? Okay, so I'm really on the hook now. I got 2 birthday gifts, 2 anniversary gifts, and the same would go with our daughter who had a conversion.
I think it's very, anniversaries of anything it's a special thing to celebrate. It's important because it really, not that I'm so good at it, honestly. I grew up in a family birthdays were, if we did celebrate it, you got lucky. Otherwise, not. It was like a hit or miss thing. I didn't grow up in that family making a big deal of birthdays. But my grandmother, although she has a blessed memory, she had a list of maybe 1,000 people. Not only her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, but also anyone who was close to her. And she knew their birthdays, and we always received a handwritten card, and we got like a $5 bill in there, and it's just to point out the birthday. And I still remember her very flowery handwriting, my dearest Yaakov dear, whatever, like the happiest day that you were born and you came to this world, whatever. It was so like.
And how many grandchildren did she have?
I honestly don't know, but well over 70 grandchildren. And
she wrote a card to everyone.
And she wrote
amazing.
A card. It was like, yes, she lived well into her 90s. Still, she was, as long as she was able to write, she would send a little check if you're a little older. Like it depended on age. And she was super good about it. And she got like a stack of cards up front. It was like always the sappiest, sweetest type of card. Amazing. With a handwritten note. And it's like, it serves to make you feel really special. So it's something. It doesn't have to be, it's not what you give. But it does really, I'm just telling you, that was a very special thing.
Okay, well, if she could keep track of 70 plus grandchildren's birthdays every year, I can keep track of 2 anniversaries and 2 birthdays for my wife.
Exactly.
Okay. That's the main thing I wanted to clear up. That was very helpful. And you helped really tackle what was sort of a challenging situation, what to do with a lot of us, like with these conversions and all these situations. But you helped reconcile that for me and the listeners too. So I deeply appreciate that, Rabbi. Thank you so much.
A pleasure.
If you enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting Torch so they can continue to spread Torah wisdom to the world by making a donation at torchweb.org and clicking donate in the top right corner of the page.